Hi there, I'm Joe, and welcome to Same Name, Different Game Gaiden. In the case of this month's installment, perhaps the show should be Same Game, Different Name. And that's because in this episode, I'll be talking about the time Capcom sued Data East over a Street Fighter clone. Last month I was perusing Twitter and I happened to see that Cuphead was trending. I clicked to see why because I was hoping it meant the forthcoming DLC, The Delicious Last Course, had either been released or at least given a firm release date. Alas, it was neither. Cuphead was trending on Twitter because a Kickstarter started for a game called Enchanted Portals, which appears to be very heavily inspired by Cuphead, both in terms of gameplay and art style. And it led to a bunch of people who don't have the benefit of being married to a lawyer to opine on how it was definitely plagiarism, or copyright infringement, or probably RICO, and how the makers of Cuphead were definitely going to sue them and win, or some variation of that. It was this that got me thinking. Do people not remember when we literally called all first-person shooters Doom clones? Or when Space Invaders created a whole new genre and invited a ton of copycats? Or the time Capcom literally sued Data East over a game they felt was just too close to Street Fighter 2 and lost. I don't think I need to go over the history of Street Fighter 2, but just in case, it was released, according to court documents, in February of 1991 in the arcade, and, well, it set the world on fire and almost single-handedly led to the second golden age of the arcade. According to documents filed with the court, the game moved over 50,000 cabinets in a time when 5,000 was considered a success for a Capcom arcade game. The SNES port of Street Fighter II is still one of Capcom's 5 best-selling games of all time and was number 1 for 17 years. In the wake of a success that earth-shattering, that paradigm-shifting, it would only make sense that a flood of would-bes and wannabes would come around. Everyone from Midway to SNK to Sega would jump on the one-on-one fighting bandwagon. But Data East came too close for Capcom's comfort with Fighter's History, released in March of 1993. Fighter's History is a thoroughly mediocre fighting game, featuring a cast of international characters with a variety of special moves, using a 6-button control scheme with 3 punches and 3 kicks, which the player uses to win the best 2 out of 3 rounds against either a human or computer-controlled opponent. To anyone's eyes, it is indeed derivative of Street Fighter II. But does it infringe? Capcom clearly thought so, and in 1993 they filed suit and a motion for a preliminary injunction to stop Data East from selling or manufacturing any more Fighter's History machines.
Capcom alleges that Data East's Fighter's History copies the distinctive fighting styles, appearances, special moves, and combination attacks of many of Street Fighter II's characters, as well as the control sequences used to execute their moves. Additionally, Capcom accuses Data East of unlawfully obtaining a free ride on Capcom's investment and success.
Capcom requested a preliminary injunction, which in layman's terms is a request to the judge to preserve the status quo and stop Data East from continuing to profit off of ideas Capcom believed it owned. To win the preliminary injunction motion, Capcom had to prove that they were very likely to win the suit based on the merits of their case, and that in the time it would take to adjudicate that case, they would continue to be harmed by the mere existence of more Fighter's History cabinets. Or that they were at least somewhat likely to win, and they would suffer more harm from Data East continuing to profit off of Fighter's History than Data East would be harmed by being forced to halt sales of Fighter's History. In legalese, Capcom would have to show that the balance of hardship tips in their favor, so even if it wasn't a slam dunk that they would win, they would be subject to irreparable harm by the motion not being granted. It's an intentionally hard standard to meet, and given Capcom's success at the time, it's difficult to imagine a comparatively smaller company like Data East doing that much harm. So the important part is the likelihood of Capcom's success on the merits of their main case. Could they prove that Data East appropriated copyrighted material to make Fighter's History? Well, to figure that out, Capcom had to show 2 things. First, that they owned copyright to Street Fighter II, which, easy enough. But the second condition is a little tougher. To show infringement, you have to have direct evidence of literal copying, which here would mean that the actual source code for Fighter's history used copied code directly from Street Fighter II, which is not the case. Or is in this case, that a combination of access to the copyrighted work and substantial similarity between the copyrighted work and the accused product, there is circumstantial evidence indicating infringement. But here's the problem. While Capcom had presented as evidence design documents for Fighter's history that mentioned Street Fighter II numerous times, the prevailing standard had a great deal to do with a legal doctrine called Scenes Affair. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Which was established in U.S. copyright law as a result of a 1987 decision from the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals.
The Scenes Affair doctrine includes stock characters and plots in dramatic works, and now encompasses stereotyped expression, standard or common features in a wide variety of works, including audiovisual works generated by computers.
Beyond that, the U.S. law around copyright specifically mentions that, quote, the functional aspects of a work may also be denied copyright protection if they constitute methods of operation, procedures, or processes, end quote. So it seems Capcom had an uphill battle. On March 16, 1994, William Orrick of the United States District Court for the Northern District of California rendered his decision. The injunction was denied. Why? Put simply, Capcom was not only drawing on a previously established genre, they were drawing on existing archetypes to populate it. Yet, believe it or not, while Capcom's game is the one that broke the dam, the one-on-one fighting genre existed before Street Fighter II. I mean, clearly, there was an original Street Fighter, but beyond that, Data East's own Karate Champ, Konami's Yi Ar Kung Fu, and even belt-scrolling one-on-one fighters like SNK's Street Smart and Atari Games' Pit Fighter predate SF2. Additionally, the idea of a one-on-one fighting game is just too broad to copyright.
The Street Fighter II work can be described in simple terms. It is a one-on-one fight game that allows players to select from a host of human characters, each with their own unique appearance and fighting style, to do battle using a variety of realistic and special or unreal moves and combination attacks. Once described in simple terms, it is clear that Capcom's copyright does not preclude the development of other one-on-one fight games. Capcom argues that the idea behind Street Fighter II can be expressed in limitless forms. It notes that under prevailing case law, the greater the range of possible expression of an idea, the greater the scope of copyright protection for that expression.
Furthermore, under the Scenes Affair doctrine, the characters in Street Fighter II being similar to characters of Fighter's history is not because Data East copied them, but in fact because they're based on existing stereotypes or other already existing characters.
The court finds that Data East has not copied the core protectable expression in Street Fighter II, although the court has concluded that 3 Fighter's history characters, Matlock, Phelan, and Ray, are similar to Guile, Chun-Li, and Ken in Street Fighter II. The characters are not virtually identical, and Data East certainly has not bodily appropriated them for use in its game. Very few of the characters and moves in Street Fighter II are copyrightable, and those that are have not been copied by Data East.
Now, it merits mention here that the court's reasoning for the 3 characters that are similar, that's simply not enough. For example, the court does concede that Ray and Ken have a lot in common, the mop of blonde hair, the blue projectile attack, but in copyright, they have to be virtually identical. And one look at Ray and Ken shows that's not the case. It's clear by reading the decision here that US courts consider simply using an idea and not the specific expression of that idea to be fair game and not in violation of copyright law. The end of Judge Orrick's ruling sums it up quite nicely.
In the end, Data East has not captured in Fighter's history the total concept and feel of the protectable expression in Street Fighter II. Rather, the similarities that result between the 2 games stem from Data East's emulation of the unprotectable, commonplace features of Street Fighter II, such as its stereotypical fight characters and its reliance on unoriginal fighting techniques derived from the martial arts. The advantage Capcom gained in relying on these stock characters and standard moves is that they are immediately recognizable and familiar to the player. One of the risks consequent to this tactic, however, is that much of Street Fighter II is left unprotectable from competitors' simulations. Street Fighter II and Fighter's history bear more similarities than Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat, because they contain a greater percentage of reality-based moves that are faithful to one or more of the martial arts disciplines and characters drawn largely from a pool of stereotyped human fighters. As a result, Capcom has left room for its competitors to emulate large portions of its game because many of its elements are not protectable. Capcom cannot now withdraw from the public domain ideas and standardized expression. It also cannot be heard to argue that two projectiles are similar even though they differ in size, shape, and color. To do so would be commensurate to awarding Capcom a monopoly over a range of characters and moves that it did not create. It would also allow Capcom to lay proprietary claim to all reality-based fight games featuring human characters. Copyright law affords no such protection.
The injunction was denied, and given how strong the wording in the ruling was, Capcom apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor and didn't pursue the issue further. This is actually a little weird because the trail just ends there. There's no formal withdrawal of the suit, at least not readily accessible online, though I suppose there might be a paper motion in some filing cabinet somewhere in a California courthouse archive. But whatever the case, Capcom let it go. They, of course, continued to make fighting games, both iterations of Street Fighter and new series like Darkstalkers. Data East did the same. Fighter's History even got a sequel for the neo-geo called Fighter's History Dynamite in Japan and Karnov's Revenge here in North America. Sadly, Data East was not able to keep up with the times, and near as I can tell, their last game was Zombie Revenge for the Dreamcast, a port of the Sega arcade game. They went out of business in 2003, and in 2004, the vast majority of their IP was secured by mobile publisher Gmode, who has re-released or licensed for re-release a number of the company's games across numerous platforms. In fact, Fighter's History is available on the Switch eShop if you really want to give it a try. But the lesson here is clear, I think. Unless you're sure a company really, truly has infringed on your copyright, has copied your source code, or is using your specific characters, it's not a good idea to take legal action. And given the long tradition of run-and-gun shooters and an art style that itself is inspired by cartoons from the 1930s, it seems to me that it would be unwise for MDHR to take any legal action against the folks behind Enchanted Portals. It's a ripoff, but probably not a legally actionable ripoff. Thank you so much for watching, and huge thanks to Eric from Game vs. Game for giving voice to the court record. If you liked what you saw, do all the stuff. Subscribe, hit the bell, like the video, leave a comment about Data East or Cuphead or Street Fighter or whatever. If you really dug the show, consider helping out on Patreon. $1 per video gets you early access and keeps the channel ad-free, not to mention getting your name listed here among all these super cool people. If you want more Street Fighter, my Street Fighter Alpha video is on the left, and if you want more Data East, my video on Crude Buster is on the right.